The anime begins with Kakeru contemplating the moon from the top of the school. At that moment, Yuka approaches him and decides to sit by his side to keep him company. Speaking of company, I need you to be my companion and give this video a like and leave a comment below. Anything to help boost the channel's engagement. Don't forget to share the video too to support us. Now let's dive back into the story. Shortly after, Kakeru reveals that 7 years earlier, his sister took her own life, and since she was his only family, he was sent to an orphanage where he has lived ever since. Even after all this time, he still hasn't come to terms with her loss and feels that his heart has grown cold. It was in that orphanage that he met Yuka. From the start, she stayed by his side and always showed him affection. Because of this, Kakeru reflects on how his life would be without Yuka. Then, Yuka asks if they can head home, and Kakeru agrees. Before leaving for school, 2 classmates show up and ask where they were. Yuka explains they were on the rooftop looking at the moon, but the 2 suspect something more and tease that they were acting like a couple. At that moment, Tadashi makes an exaggerated joke, mimicking them with a forced kiss, which leaves Yuka embarrassed and furious. She pushes him away angrily, while Kakeru just smiles at the scene. He then remarks that these 2, along with Yuka, are the only people he truly trusts and enjoys being around. Later on their way, Kaori mentions promotions at a shopping mall and suggests everyone go together. Kakeru declines as he hates crowded places. Yuka also gives up on the idea, and Kakeru walks her to the house of her adoptive parents, the Minesa family. As Yuka says goodbye, Kakeru has a last-minute change of heart and decides to accompany her to the mall. While crossing a bridge, a strange sensation forces them to close their eyes. When they open them again, they notice the entire city is bathed in a reddish hue. The moon now appears completely black, and terrified, they decide to run to Yuka's house to find her parents. But no one is there. They then head to the school, believing it to be a safe place. However, they are surrounded by monstrous creatures and feel that strange pressure again. When they open their eyes once more, they find themselves back in the real world, near the subway station. The next day, Yuka visits Kakeru's house and finds his bedroom door open. She enters and sees he's having a nightmare. Yuka asks if he's okay, and Kakeru replies that he is, just that he couldn't sleep well. She mentions she also had trouble resting that night. On their way to school, Yuka feels ill, and they stop for a moment. At that point, their friends wave from a classroom window. Wanting to reassure her, Kakeru promises that if the Crimson Knight returns, he will protect her no matter what. His words deeply move Yuka, who starts to cry. Their classmates, witnessing the scene, think Kakeru made her upset. He asks her to stop crying, and they head to the classroom together. Soon after, the teacher introduces a new student named Momono, who came from Italy. During the break, several students approach her with questions about her country, but she shows impatience and asks them to leave her alone. Shortly afterward, Yuka approaches her and suddenly faints. Kakeru doesn't hesitate and carries Yuka to the infirmary, despite her protests that she can walk on her own. Upon opening the door, Kakeru encounters a student leaving the infirmary, and they explain to the doctor what happened. The doctor assures them there's no cause for concern, and that Yuka just needs to rest, so she'll stay in the infirmary for a while. The doctor then asks Kakeru about his eye, as he always wears an eye patch. Kakeru explains he was born that way. After leaving Yuka resting on the bed, he returns to the classroom. Once Kakeru leaves, Yuka tells the doctor that his right eye doesn't function and that he covers it because it has a different color. At that moment, Momono is on the school rooftop, visibly worried, wondering what happened. Later, on the way to Yuka's house, Kakeru asks if she's feeling better, and she replies that she just needs to rest. Kakeru then invites her again to go to the mall, unaware that a strange shadow is watching them from afar. As they approach the bridge where they had experienced the Crimson Knight, they decide to avoid that place and take the subway instead. A short while later, at the mall, the 2 stroll through the stores, but they are observed by the same shadow and also by a mysterious red-haired girl. After finishing their visit to the fair, they sit on the grass to drink juice, and Kakeru thinks to himself that he wants to make Yuka happy. Suddenly, the sky turns red again, and as they look around, they see the strange shadow. To Kakeru's surprise, it's Kukuria, his sister, but upon seeing her, they are transported back to the bridge, surrounded by the Crimson Knight once more. Without understanding what's happening, Kakeru tries to protect Yuka, but he hears one of the monsters calling his name, as if it recognizes him. The monsters advance toward them, but at that moment, the red-haired girl throws a sword that slices through the enemies and shouts for them to duck. A powerful light then bursts from her back, annihilating the creatures. Moments later, the red-haired girl walks to her sword, retrieves it, and asks if they're injured. Kakeru and Yuka stand up and ask who she is, but a new monster appears nearby, prompting the girl to tell them to flee immediately. After running for a while, the red-haired girl introduces herself as Misuzu Kusakabe, and her sword vanishes. She explains that she's a third-year student at Niri High School, assuming they study there too. They confirm they do, but are in their second year. Kakeru introduces himself as Kakeru Satsuki, and his friend as Yuka Minase. Yuka asks Misuzu what that place is, and she admits she's not entirely sure, but believes it's a parallel dimension to the real world, intentionally created, and that they were chosen to be there. Misuzu then asks if they have any powers like hers, but both say they don't. Suddenly, a noise echoes nearby, and Misuzu warns that it's the monsters. Yuka, desperate, begs to go home immediately. Meanwhile, Misuzu begins chanting words in another language, and massive crystal towers, charged with powerful energy, appear ahead. She decides to head toward them, but Kakeru wants to follow. Misuzu warns that it's too dangerous since he has no powers and could end up being a liability. At that moment, more monsters appear, and Misuzu summons her sword again, urging them to run. Meanwhile, another girl appears, casting ice chains that trap some of the enemies. Despite this, Kakeru insists on reaching the crystal tower, believing it could be a safe place until the Crimson Night ends. Misuzu warns that the path is risky, and she won't be able to protect them the entire time, but Kakeru insists on going. After running for a while, Kakeru suddenly stops, feeling intense pain in his right eye. As he tries to press on, a monster in the form of a woman appears, declaring that she won't let them pass. Misuzu fights the creature, but grows tired after a while and resorts to magic, making the enemy vanish instantly. Soon after, the three reach a massive tree surrounded by gigantic crystals. In front of them, they see Lisette, a girl trapped inside a crystal. She introduces herself and explains that she was sealed in that place. Hearing this, Misuzu suspects Lisette might be responsible for creating the Crimson Night, possibly to draw someone to rescue her. Kakeru asks her to free them, but Lisette says it's impossible. Misuzu believes Lisette may have created this world unconsciously. At that moment, Yuka pleads with Kakeru to save Lisette, believing she's suffering. Determined, Kakeru promises to help her. However, a group of monsters appears, declaring that they, especially Kakeru, shouldn't exist in that world. Meanwhile, back in the infirmary, the doctor talks to the boy who had left earlier, asking if he did something, and he denies it. At that same moment, Misuzu, Yuka, and Kakeru suddenly reappear on a table in the shopping mall. Later, after recovering from the shock, Misuzu asks if they're okay. They reply that they're more or less fine. Kakeru then asks if there could be other chosen ones taken to the Crimson Knight's world. Misuzu confirms that it's possible, as she believes she saw 3 other people, 1 up close and 2 from a distance. All of them also study at the same school as Kakeru and Yuka, and they were 2 girls and a boy facing what is called the Zone. Upon hearing this, Kakeru and Yuka are confused, and Misuzu explains that they practice an art known as Onmyo-do, which combines magic with the principles of yin-yang. She adds that in this world, the shadowy beings are called Ioni. Then, Misuzu says she will introduce the other chosen ones, as she has seen them at school, and even knows the name of one of them. At that moment, Kakeru asks if these other young people also use the same type of magic as her, since he saw them fighting the Ioni. Misuzu replies that they don't, although each of them has different abilities. Curious, Kakeru asks if he might also have some kind of power, recalling that the black monsters said he shouldn't exist in that world. To clarify, Misuzu asks him to remove the eye patch from his right eye for a moment. Kakeru remembers that he always feels pain in that eye when he's in that world, but agrees to remove the eye patch. As he does, Misuzu observes his eye and feels a strange reaction in her own hand. She asks if Kakeru noticed anything, and he says he didn't. Misuzu then concludes that he does indeed have a power, but it hasn't awakened yet. After spending some time together, they part ways. Later, on their way home, Kakeru and Yuka talk about what they heard from Misuzu. Both believe they must have some kind of power, as they wouldn't have been chosen for that world for no reason. As they continue walking, they run into Tadashi and Kaori, who, as usual, are bickering, which brings a smile to Kakeru and Yuka's faces. Suddenly, Kakeru feels as if his sister is approaching. However, it's Shiori who appears before them, accompanied by some friends exploring the city. As she approaches, Shiori explains that she got lost while trying to follow a cat, and then stares intently at Kakeru, making him uncomfortable with her piercing gaze. After a while, Kakeru continues walking with only Yuka, and on their way, they pass by the place where he works. He decides to stop by to inform his boss that he'll be absent that day. Upon entering, he meets a new employee, a young girl. They hadn't met before. Kakeru asks if he knows her from somewhere, and she replies that she probably studies at the same school and hides her hand, saying she injured it recently. The girl then introduces herself as Yukiko, explaining that she's a first-year student at Yukan Academy. Kakeru and Yuka introduce themselves as well. While Yukiko prepares a coffee, they chat for a few minutes, and soon after, Kakeru and Yuka decide to head home. Before parting, Kakeru asks Yuka to wait for him at that spot if the Crimson Knight returns. Yuka hugs him, and Kakeru wonders if he'll be able to protect her the next time. They're pulled into that other world. The next morning, Kakeru dreams of a castle where he sees a woman's hands being pulled by a robot. He soon wakes up, and later, at the school library, he browses through some books until he finds one titled The Girl Trapped in the Crystal Castle. The title reminds him of the girl he saw trapped in the Crimson Knight, so he decides to read it. However, he's interrupted by Yuka, who's worried because she didn't see him during the break. Kakeru explains that he was trying to find answers, and she offers to help. He then picks up a book he had seen earlier, and once again, he has a vision of his sister. Desperate, he runs to help her, but doesn't find her. Instead, he finds a notebook on the ground with a note that reads, "It was you who awakened the demons." Later that same day, Misuzu, Yuka, and Kakeru observe the black moon from the school rooftop. They realize that this is not a good sign. After this scene, they agree that if they encounter the Crimson Knight again, they will meet in one of the school's corridors. Before heading to class, Kakeru asks to speak with Misuzu, and she invites him to meet her in her classroom during lunch. During the lesson, Kakeru can't stop thinking about the message he read in the library, becoming distracted and failing to hear when the teacher calls him to solve a problem on the board. Tadashi, taking advantage of the situation, starts teasing him. Annoyed, Kaori intervenes, smacking Tadashi and scolding him. The teacher then asks both of them to stop and pay attention to the lesson. At lunchtime, Kakeru talks with Misuzu. He asks her to teach him how to fight so he can discover and awaken the power he carries. However, Misuzu refuses, saying he wouldn't be able to learn quickly enough, even if he tried with all his strength. Meanwhile, Yuka is alone in the school garden. At that moment, Yukiko appears, greets her, and asks to try her lunch. Without Yuka noticing, Yukiko takes the entire sandwich and devours it quickly, praising its taste. After that, she thanks Yuka, and the two talk for a while. Shortly afterward, Kakeru continues his search for answers. He looks through science fiction books, but feels frustrated, as he finds nothing that truly explains what's happening. Back at the park, Yuka and Yukiko see some boys from the infirmary pass by. Yukiko greets them enthusiastically, which makes Yuka think she might be interested in one of them. Yukiko smiles and says that's not the case, explaining that she just feels those boys are a lot like her. Then, she spontaneously hugs Yuka, as if seeking comfort. A little later, Kakeru sees Tadashi helping with some books in the library, trying to assist Shiori, who is in charge of the place. However, Tadashi organizes the books incorrectly, and after fixing the mistake, Shiori asks him to help with another set of books, while Kaori encourages him to try harder. At that moment, Kakeru leaves the library, and Shiori discreetly follows him to the garden, where she watches him training with a piece of wood as if it were a sword. On the school rooftop, Yuka and Misuzu also see him. Misuzu then decides to invite Kakeru to her house to talk more about his powers. When they arrive, Kakeru and Yuka sit down with her, and Misuzu begins to explain. She reveals that her family belongs to the Kusakabe clan, whose mission is to protect people. From a young age, she decided to become stronger to fulfill this destiny, and now she is the bearer of the 5 legendary swords of her lineage. As these weapons hold immense power, they can only be used in emergencies. Misuzu shows them her swords and explains that each one can only be obtained through a fair duel with steel blades against its original wielder. To prevent anyone from amassing too much power, each sword was meant to belong to a single person. However, Misuzu defeated all the wielders and claimed all 5 swords. This forced her to leave her village and live alone in her mother's house, as her father's family wants to reclaim the swords. This revelation shocks Kakeru and Yuka, who ask her to tell them more about her family. However, Misuzu says it's time to start training and hands Kakeru a wooden sword, asking him to try cutting a lit candle as practice. While he trains, Misuzu sits with Yuka to talk. After a while, Yuka asks if Misuzu believes Kakeru has any talent with the sword. Misuzu bluntly replies that he doesn't. Both conclude that it will be essential for him to discover his true power to use it in the next Crimson Night. At that moment, Yuka asks Misuzu about the last fight she had during the Crimson Night. Misuzu recalls that in that moment, she used magic to make the enemy disappear, so she decides to explain in more detail why she had to leave her village. She reveals that during the duel for the last sword, she accidentally injured her own father. After that, she began following in the footsteps of Misao, a legendary warrior from her village considered the strongest woman in the Kusakabe clan. Misao mastered a magic called Go, which was forbidden because it went against the community's rules, leading to her banishment from the village 70 years ago. Now, Misuzu hopes to find Misao in the Crimson Night. Meanwhile, Kakeru continues practicing with the wooden sword, and Misuzu urges him not to rest until he masters the technique she taught him. Impatient, Kakeru insists she teach him to fight in a different way without wasting so much time. At that exact moment, he feels intense pain in his right eye, and the Crimson Knight appears again. Elsewhere, the Black Knights, who had attacked them before, gather beside Lisette, the girl trapped in the crystal. They discuss Kakeru, noting that he hasn't awakened his powers yet, and decide to quickly attack the other Chosen Ones to ensure Lisette remains imprisoned. However, Lisette wishes to be freed, as she has been confined there for 70 years. Soon after, all the Black Knights set out to confront the young group, declaring they will kill them and stating that humans are weak, which is why they abandoned their humanity to become stronger. The battle begins, and Misuzu urges Kakeru to flee with Yuka to protect her. He hesitates for a moment, but ultimately agrees. As they run, one of the Black Knights pursues them, while the others stay behind to fight Misuzu, who is focused on ensuring the two survive. After running for a while, Kakeru and Yuka hide behind some cars, but the Black Knight catches up to them. Desperate, they take shelter inside one of the vehicles. The enemy finds them and strikes the car repeatedly, eventually lifting it and throwing it to the ground, severely injuring them. Just as the Black Knight is about to capture them, a chain of ice appears and strikes him, making him vanish instantly. At the same time, Misuzu continues her fight against the other monsters. When it seems she's about to be defeated, a new girl appears and eliminates the enemy in front of her. Meanwhile, inside the wrecked car, Kakeru is unconscious and feels as if Kukuria, his sister, opens the door and helps him out. In that same moment, the boy from the infirmary they had seen earlier is also fighting monsters in the Crimson Night, but gets injured during the battle. When he reappears at the subway station, some girls see him wounded and comment among themselves that he seems to be from their school. Later, back at school, Yukiko is at the study club, where they focus on modernology. Excitedly, she explains to Yuka and Misuzu that modernology is similar to archaeology, but focused on analyzing the present. Yukiko is thrilled, believing her new friends might join the club. However, Yuka notices that Kakeru is quiet and distracted. Ignoring what was said, he remains lost in thought, recalling all the times he saw Kukuria, his sister, both in the real world and in the Crimson Night. Yuka tries to get his attention, asking him not to dwell so much on that other world. She then asks Yukiko if she also has some kind of special power like Misuzu, but Yukiko says she doesn't. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, the doctor tends to the wounds of the other boy. She asks how he got injured, but he avoids answering and acts rudely. Irritated, the doctor confronts him, but he flees immediately. Back at the club, the group discusses the monsters of the Crimson Night, and Misuzu says there's not much they can do about them. However, the boy mentions that these creatures are called fragments and expresses curiosity about how many other young people are also taken to that world. At that moment, Yukiko reveals that she knows another boy, the one who saved them during the first Crimson Night. Meanwhile, in the hallway, the same boy who fled from the infirmary is hurriedly eating a hamburger. When he notices the doctor still chasing him, he takes off running again. At that moment, the friends decide they need to find him to learn more about the Crimson Night. Trying to escape, the boy enters a room but ends up tripping over Yukiko. He asks her not to leave until the doctor is gone. When Yukiko gets up to see what knocked her over, she realizes it's the very boy they were looking for. Later, everyone gathers at the school courtyard to talk about the Crimson Night, and the boy introduces himself as Takahisa Tajima. During the conversation, it becomes clear that none of them have solid information about that other world. Frustrated, Tajima decides to walk away and leaves alone. Yukiko tries to convince him to join them so they can fight the monsters together, but he refuses immediately. Seeing his behavior, everyone thinks he's a rude boy, but Yukiko believes he's just misunderstood. That night, Kakeru trains with Misuzu, but doesn't make much progress. Yukiko watches and comments that he needs to try harder. Misuzu knocks him down and asks what truly motivates him to train. Kakeru replies that it's to save Yuka, but Misuzu believes he won't be able to face anyone if he continues like this. She advises him that, in addition to strengthening his body, he must change his mindset, turning his feelings into combat strength. They continue practicing, but as they prepare for another sparring session, Kakeru feels intense pain in his right eye again. At that moment, everyone thinks Misuzu is about to attack Yuka, causing Kakeru to instinctively try to protect her. Yukiko warns him that focusing only on Yuka during a fight could put him at risk of death. However, Yuka insists that the most important thing is Kakeru's willingness to fight. The next day at school, Kakeru confesses to Yuka that he feels bad for not being able to protect her, but she reassures him, saying she doesn't have powers either, and that everything is fine as long as he stays by her side. Hearing this, Kakeru smiles, saying he feels the same way, and that he needs to turn his feelings into power. Suddenly, they hear Tadashi speaking Italian. Turning around, they see him with Kaori and Shiori. Annoyed by his terrible imitation of the language, Shiori scolds him and asks him to leave her alone. Tadashi runs off and ends up crashing into a pole. Shortly after, Shiori quickens her pace to distance herself from the others and heads straight to the classroom. Later, Misuzu and Kakeru leave class to go to the club, where Yuka and Yukiko are already waiting. As soon as they arrive, Kakeru feels the pain in his eye again. Misuzu warns that they're about to return to the Crimson Night. When the scenery changes, they see Tajima fighting near the school. Yukiko explains that he's a fire psychic. Soon after, the same Black Knight who had attacked them before appears. Misuzu immediately engages in combat. Meanwhile, at the Great Crystal Tree, two other Black Knights observe the battle. Among them is a woman known as Viridia. Viridia comments to another knight that these young people are the same ones who defeated their comrade Gula. In response, Superbia declares that this time they won't stand a chance, as they'll face the Knights of Wrath, Invidia, and Contrail, who are far more powerful than Gula. Back with our heroes, Misuzu continues fighting the Black Knight when suddenly an attack is launched at Yuka. At that moment, Kakeru throws himself over her to protect her. Yukiko warns that Misuzu is in serious trouble, which makes Kakeru wish more than ever to have powers. However, Yukiko tells him that merely wishing won't solve anything. She then pulls two daggers from her clothing and swiftly attacks the enemy. For a moment, she thinks she's defeated him, but then Aira appears, striking her with a massive hook and knocking her to the ground. As he threatens the group, Tajima appears and launches a powerful fire attack against the monsters. However, Aira retaliates by throwing his hook, knocking Tajima down as well. Right after, the Crimson Knight suddenly disappears, and they return to the normal world. The friends worry about Yukiko, who explains that when she removes her glasses, she transforms into another person capable of fighting monsters quickly. She also reveals that her wounds heal on their own because she is completely immortal. To prove her point, she shows them that her injuries regenerate in a matter of seconds. Even so, Yuka remains concerned and hugs her. Trying to explain, Yukiko mentions that in her country, there are many assassinations, but before she can continue, her friends interrupt, saying they just want her to be okay. This touches Yukiko, as she realizes she has been accepted by them. Seeing Tajima walking away, the group calls him back to the club. Later, Kakeru practices alone on the rooftop, reflecting on his determination to protect Yuka. During training, he notices she's not feeling well and decides to accompany her to the infirmary. There, the doctor informs them that Yuka has anemia. Despite this, Yuka seems worried about Kakeru, especially regarding the mystery of the notebook left in the library. Noticing her concern, Kakeru holds her hand. Seeing this, the doctor assumes they're having a romantic moment, leaving them embarrassed. At that moment, Tajima gets up from another bed in the infirmary and complains, saying he doesn't want to hear it. He then leaves angrily. In the hallway, Tajima bumps into Yukiko, who is carrying several bags of snacks, causing them to fall to the floor. He helps her pick them up, but takes one of the snacks before leaving, while Yukiko watches him walk away. Back in the classroom, Kakeru starts to miss Yuka. As soon as the class ends, he goes to the infirmary to find her. As they prepare to leave, the doctor asks why Yuka can't sleep. Unable to explain what's really happening, they remain silent. The doctor concludes that Yuka's sleeplessness is Kakeru's fault and suggests he sing lullabies to her. Skeptical, Kakeru hesitates, but the doctor explains that it can even be done over the phone, sharing that she used to do this with her own son. Seeing their surprised expressions, she reveals that Tajima is her son. The youngsters are even more shocked, but the doctor clarifies that she's his adoptive mother, having found him alone on the streets as a child and raised him since then. While speaking, she smiles as she looks out the window, seeing Tajima eating as usual and Yukiko bringing him food. Before parting, she asks Yuka to insist that Kakeru sing her a lullaby, and Yuka agrees with a shy smile. Meanwhile, on the school rooftop, Tadashi chases a cat. When he finally catches it, Kaori warns him to be more careful, as he could get hurt. At that moment, the cat scratches his hand and escapes, running straight to Shiori, who picks it up and calms it. Meanwhile, she watches Kakeru and Yuka walking together. Shortly after, Kakeru runs into Misuzu and hurries to her to plan their next training session at her house. However, Misuzu says that before that, she wants to introduce someone important, the girl they saw in the Crimson Night, and promises to bring her to the club later. When Kakeru and Yuka arrive at the club, they are greeted by Yukiko, who is accompanied by Tajima, sitting at the table eating a snack. Surprised, Kakeru asks what he's doing there, and Yukiko explains that Tajima will now be part of the club. As Kakeru prepares to sit down, Tajima spills his drink. Yukiko rushes to grab a towel and clean up the mess. Soon after, Misuzu arrives, bringing with her a new girl named Kukuri Tachibana. As she enters and greets them, Kakeru is shocked, believing she is his older sister due to their striking resemblance. Misuzu explains that Kukuri is mute, but can hear and understand everything around her perfectly. If someone wants to communicate with her, they just need to give her paper and a pencil, and she will respond in writing. At that moment, Yuka approaches Kukuri to introduce herself, making Kukuri a bit uncomfortable. Then, Yukiko says a few words in her native language to welcome her. Hearing the phrase, Kukuri comments that she'd like to use it as the club's motto. After consulting the others, Yukiko decides to adopt it officially. However, Tajima criticizes the idea, calling it childish, and leaves angrily. After the meeting ends, Kakeru and Yuka talk about Kukuri and the new motto. Meanwhile, Tajima speeds off on his motorcycle, trying to leave the city. Buri encounters a strange red barrier. He crashes into it and falls to the ground, noticing that birds can pass through freely, concluding that the barrier only affects them, the chosen ones. At the same moment, Kakeru returns to the club with Yuka and asks Misuzu to help him train. They decide to practice right there, and Misuzu uses a scarf to teach him the importance of staying calm. She explains that if he can't learn to control himself, he'll never be able to protect Yuka or defeat his enemies. Suddenly, everyone senses that the Crimson Night is about to return. As the sky changes, Aira appears to attack them. Kakeru runs with Yuka to protect her, while Misuzu confronts the enemy once again. Nearby, Tajima rescues Yukiko, who had been caught off guard in the bathroom. A few minutes later, after Kakeru and Yuka manage to escape the school, they come face to face with Superbia. Determined to fight, Kakeru confronts her, but his attacks have no effect. In response, the knight brutally throws him to the ground and advances toward Yuka. Despite being injured, Kakeru quickly gets up, grabs the sword, and decides to fight again. though he believes he'll be defeated once more. At that moment, Hinotaka's a sword appearing behind the knight and recalls Misuzu's words. He takes a deep breath, calms himself, and feels his right eye open beneath the eye patch. This allows him to foresee the enemy's attack before it happens. Thanks to this new ability, Kakeru dodges a fatal blow. Surprised, Superbia says it's impossible for a human like him to awaken such power, but Kakeru continues to predict her movements, dodging and counterattacking with precision. With a decisive strike, he defeats her, and immediately, one of Thegent crystals imprisoning Lisette at the Great Tree vanishes, signaling that their prison is weakening. This makes everyone realize that Kakeru has awakened his power. Right after, he collapses, trembling, and Yuka runs to him, asking, "What's happening?" Later, Kakeru is lying in a bed while the girls discuss that awakening his ability has made him ill, as he still doesn't understand his power. Yukiko suggests taking him to a hospital, but Misuzu explains that it won't help, as the issue is not physical but mental. That's why she asked for help to bring him to her house, where she could try to heal him with her magic. Sometime later, Yuka and Yukiko leave the room, so Misuzu can tend to Kakeru in peace. Even so, Yuka remains worried, and says she wants to stay by his side. At that moment, Kukuri arrives and silently hugs her. Meanwhile, in the room, Kakeru dreams and sees a knight who reveals that his power is called the Eye of Aeon. The knight tells him that if he dies now, he won't have to suffer the burden of carrying such power. However, Kakeru refuses, stating that he must stay alive to return to Yuka. The knight warns that by choosing to leave, he'll have to face his greatest weaknesses. The next morning, Kakeru wakes up and sees Misuzu asleep beside him. When she wakes, he thanks her for her help, but she says she only assisted a little to stabilize his power. Misuzu then leaves to rest. As she exits, she notices that someone left food in front of her bedroom door. Meanwhile, Kukuri sets the table for breakfast and smiles upon seeing Yukiko arrive all disheveled. Nearby, Yuka is sad, as she thought she saw Misuzu too close to Kakeru when she brought food for her. Back in the dining area, Misuzu greets the other girls, who quickly ask about Kakeru's condition. She responds that he's already doing better, which relieves and delights them. Then, she asks who brought her breakfast and learns it was Yuka, who was later seen looking sad. Later, Kakeru gets up and goes to the garden to talk to Yuka, but notices she's acting serious. Concerned, he asks if something's wrong, and Yuka replies that it's nothing, trying to hide her sadness. From a distance, Misuzu watches the scene through a window. Later, everyone gathers in the room and chats while waiting for Yuka to finish getting ready. When she's finally done, they decide to head to school together. At that moment, Misuzu stands up, but feels weak and collapses. Kakeru immediately rushes to help her, and seeing this, Yuka becomes shaken and runs off, believing Kakeru is in love with Misuzu. Surprised, Kakeru chases after her to ask what's going on, while the other girls are confused about why Yuka left like that. Shortly after, at school, Shiori walks behind Tadashi, who warns her not to walk while reading. Shiori retorts that he's there to protect her, which makes Tadashi think she wants to be his girlfriend. However, both Shiori and Kaori scold him, reminding him not to get his hopes up, and Kaori even hits him to drive the point home. Meanwhile, Misuzu, Yukiko, and Kukuri walk to school together. On the way, Misuzu talks about Kakeru's power, explaining that it's extremely difficult to control. For this reason, it's known as the Eye of Evil, though Kakeru called it the Eye of Aeon. Upon hearing this name, Yukiko is surprised, recalling an old legend from her childhood. According to the story, in the Middle Ages, a king of Drasvanyanamid Velad possessed the Eye of Aeon. Misuzu reveals that this was the name of the knight who appeared in Kakeru's dreams. The girls speculate that this might be the cause of Yuka's sadness, but Misuzu insists it's due to another reason. Meanwhile, on the school rooftop, Kakeru finally catches up with Yuka, who asks what's going on. Hesitant at first, she decides to reveal what she's thinking. Hearing her, Kakeru clarifies that she's completely mistaken, as he and Misuzu are not romantically involved. She only helped him heal. This should have been obvious. At that moment, in another hallway, Misuzu and Yukiko are talking. Yukiko suggests that perhaps they should leave the city to avoid being pulled into the Crimson Night again. Then, Tajima appears, saying it's impossible to leave Thessaly due to a red barrier that prevents anyone from escaping. But as Tajima trees, to explain more about the barrier, the doctor shows up and takes him back to the infirmary to scold him for his behavior. Back on the rooftop, Yuka hugs Kakeru and begs him to kiss her as proof that he feels nothing for Misuzu. However, not getting the response she expected, she believes she's being rejected and runs off crying. Seconds later, the Crimson Night begins again. Desperate, Kakeru searches for Yuka, determined not to leave her alone. As he descends the stairs, he encounters two monsters, but they are quickly defeated by Misuzu. After defeating them, Kakeru asks her to help look for Yuka, but Misuzu insists that staying together is more important. In another part of the city, Tajima also fights monsters, defeating them with his fire powers. Soon after, Aira appears to attack him again. Meanwhile, the rest of the group faces another Black Knight named Abetia. They ask why their knights want to kill them, and the knight coldly replies that they must die to change the future. Without further explanation, he attacks. Though weakened, Misuzu decides to face him alone. However, when she collapses, Kakeru tries to oust the Eye of Aeon, but fails to activate his power. At that moment, Kukuri, surprising everyone, summons her ice chains and defeats both the monsters and the knight, leaving everyone stunned, with the enemies defeated. The group decides to search for Yuka. However, Tajima appears and reveals that it might be too late. He explains that he tried to protect her, but she ran off, leaving behind her penguin bag. This sends Kakeru into despair, and he asks where Tajima last saw her. The answer is near the infirmary. Upon hearing this, Kakeru immediately runs toward the infirmary, warning the girls that something terrible has happened there. Meanwhile, Yuka relives in her mind the moments when she saw Kakeru with Misuzu and recalls feeling rejected. Convinced that he is pulling away from her, her anguish grows. At that moment, a group of monsters surrounds her. Terrified, Yuka screams for Kakeru with all her strength, and mysteriously, the monsters retreat for a few moments. Soon after, the group reaches the infirmary and finds the place completely destroyed, with broken walls and furniture in disarray. This makes Kakeru even more desperate, and they decide to split up to search for Yuka within the school. Meanwhile, inside the crystal, Lisette senses her magic returning and fills with hope, smiling to herself. A few days later, the search for Yuka continues. Exhausted, Kakeru trips and falls, but Tajima helps him up and asks if he's okay. Despite his injuries, Kakeru only shows concern for Yuka, feeling guilty for leaving her alone. Seeing his pain, Tajima finally understands the depth of Kakeru's feelings for her. Shortly after, the group hears a strange noise and realizes more monsters are approaching. Without hesitation, Tajima confronts them with his fire powers and then continues the search. Meanwhile, Misuzu searches another area and, looking up, feels that the Black Moon is dangerously approaching Earth. Not far away, Yukiko finds some of the monsters that were repelled by Yuka's scream. Near them, she sees Yuka sitting, lost in thoughts about Kakeru. At the same time, Viridia returns to the Great Crystal, where Lisette continues trying to escape her prison. To prevent this, Viridia takes control of the situation and delegates the task of eliminating the Chosen Ones to the other three knights, leaving them to fight. Later, Yuka rummages through her penguin bag while talking with Yukiko, who tells her how Kukuri defeated the monsters with her ice chains. Yukiko suggests their turn to the school to reunite with the others. Even so, Yuka remains dejected, believing Kakeru is drifting away from her because she lacks special powers like the others. Hearing this, Yukiko insists she's mistaken and decides to share her own story before coming to Japan. She reveals that she lived in Dressvania, a place marked by wars and destruction where everyone fought Ekother. Being immortal, she was used as a weapon and forced to watch her family die while becoming an assassin against her will. This is why Yukiko doesn't want Yuka to awaken any powers, fearing she might suffer the same fate and lose her chance at happiness. Moved by her words, Yuka hugs Yukiko, declaring that she has already found her true power. At the same time, at the immense crystal under the shadow of the giant tree, Lisette continues trying to break free. However, Viridia appears again and unleashes a powerful light attack. The attack is so intense that it's visible to all the Chosen Ones, no matter where they are. Meanwhile, Abacha is defeated in combat just as Kakeru and Tajima spot the strange glow. They run toward it and witness the knight's fall. However, they are immediately attacked by Nvidia. With no way out, they decide to face her together, with Tajima launching a series of flaming attacks. Soon after, Misuzu arrives, wielding her legendary sword, and directly confronts Superbia, leaving Kakeru and Tajima to deal with Aira. At that moment, Nvidia vanishes, and Kakeru realizes he's about to be attacked from behind. Kakeru quickly dodges and counterattacks, wounding Nvidia with his sword. Meanwhile, Superbia demonstrates to Misuzu that he is perfectly familiar with her family's combat techniques, surprising her. Back in the battle with the young group, Kakeru tries to strike Nvidia, but she moves with extreme speed. To support him, Tajima unleashes fire attacks against her. Soon after, Superbia showcases his immense power, making it clear he's on another level. This prompts Misuzu to demand to know who he really is. Meanwhile, Nvidia prepares to attack again when Yukiko and Kukuri arrive. Intervening and saving the group from her strike. Nearby, Superbia notices that Misuzu is in no condition to continue fighting him and declares they will settle the battle another time. Before leaving, he delegates all responsibility to Nvidia, who decides to self-destruct, trapping the young group in her energy sphere to take them down with her. But at that moment, from the school rooftop, Yuka screams with all her strength. A brilliant beam of light erupts from her body, neutralizing all weapons, both those of the Chosen Ones and Nvidia's. Seizing the opportunity, Yukiko delivers the final blow, defeating Nvidia, confused by what they just witnessed. The group wonders what happened. Misuzu concludes that the light emitted by Yuka neutralized all powers present, including their own. At that moment, Kakeru realizes that Yuka has finally awakened her power and rejoices immensely for her, while Tajima is impressed, stating that her ability is incredible. However, Misuzu is concerned, believing this power could pose a great danger since it neutralizes all abilities, whether from allies or enemies. Soon after, Yuka appears before the group and pleads with Kakeru to love her, saying she will be the one to protect him. Exhausted, she then faints. At that moment, a memory surfaces in which Lisette recalls the death of Belen in a war, vowing revenge against those who defeated him. Meanwhile, inside the great crystal under the giant tree, two knights reflect that, in the end, the most powerful force of all might be innocence. However, Superbia already has a plan to eliminate the young group once and for all. Viridia declares her full trust in him. The next day, Yuka is resting in a bed, while Kakeru sits quietly by her side, watching over her. When she wakes, Yuka thinks about calling her mother, but Kakeru asks her not to worry and just rest, assuring her he's taken care of everything. A little further away, in the living room, Misuzu and Kukuri discuss recent events and decide that everyone should skip classes that day to rest and recover. After this, Kukuri goes to prepare tea, while Tajima comments to Misuzu that with Yuka's newly awakened powers, they finally have a chance to defeat the knights. Even so, Misuzu remains unconvinced, seeking clearer answers. She wants to know if there's truly an end to the Crimson Knight and how long they'll keep running from the monsters. Tajima, in response, says they're constantly being hunted and have no choice but to face and defeat them. Hearing this, Misuzu remains lost in her doubts, acknowledging that she might be overthinking all the details. Shortly after, while Kukuri prepares the tea, Kakeru approaches her and asks if she is truly on their side. Surprised, Kukuri reaches for her notebook to respond. But before she can write, Kakeru asks that, no matter what happens, she never hurts Yuka. He then walks away, and when Kukuri finally finds her answer in the notebook, she discovers something unsettling. She remembers nothing about her own past. Meanwhile, in the garden of the house, Misuzu checks the spiritual dolls she uses as a barrier against the monsters. Kakeru arrives at the scene and explains that the spiritual dolls are used to prevent enemies from reaching them in their world. Impressed, he watches Misuzu closely until she calls him to another location, saying she needs to tell him something very important. At that moment, one of the dolls mysteriously breaks. In another room, Yukiko Kusakabe feels guilty for unintentionally injuring Kakeru during the last battle. Sitting there, as usual, casually eating a piece of chicken, Tajima talks to her. He tells her she shouldn't blame herself, as it couldn't be avoided. If she keeps dwelling on those thoughts, she might lose battles that were practically won. For him, the most important thing is securing victory, as that's the only way they'll survive. He adds, "If any of them die in combat, it's simply because it was their fate. Hearing these words, Yukiko believes that if Tajima continues thinking this way, he'll end up alone. She decides to open her heart and explains that, being immortal, she has witnessed the deaths of countless people she loved. This deep suffering gave rise to her other personality, leading her to vow to live alone forever. However, thanks to the Crimson Knight, she met them all, and now finally feels accepted and loved. That's why she feels so guilty for accidentally hurting Kakeru. Sometime later, a crow lands on a tree in the backyard of the house, and suddenly its eyes glow an intense red. At that moment, Misuzu talks to Kakeru and reveals that there's a forbidden magic capable of combining the powers of the East and the West. She explains that a young woman from her clan, named Misako Kusakabe, was exiled for practicing it 60 years ago. Despite everyone's disapproval, Misuzu always admired her for her strength and nobility. Intrigued, Kakeru asks why she's telling him this. In response, Misuzu reveals that during the previous day's attack, she realized that Misako is actually one of the Black Knights they're fighting, specifically the one known as Superbia. This revelation piques Kakeru's curiosity, as he points out that Misako should be dead, given she lived 60 years ago. Misuzu explains that in the Crimson Knight, time doesn't flow as it does in the real world. Even if hours or days pass, nothing seems to change when they return to their world. She believes Misako has been trapped for those 60 years in a place where time stands still. Misuzu confesses her fear of what this might have done to her. As Misako is an extremely powerful mage, Misuzu believes that to prevent her from defeating them, they need to take drastic measures. She then cuts her own arm and asks Kakeru to drink her blood to gain the power of her family. At first, Kakeru refuses, but Misuzu insists, saying it's for his and Yuka's sake. Finally, he relents and licks the blood from her arm. At that exact moment, a lizard with red eyes watches. Yuka also witnesses the scene and faints from the intense pressure. During her faint, Yuka dreams of Lisette, who speaks of the love she feels for Belad and vows to destroy the world because her beloved is dead and nothing else matters. Meanwhile, Tajima is casually walking down the street when the doctor finds him and drags him to the infirmary by his ears. There, she asks where he spent the night, and Tajima replies that he was at a friend's house. The doctor presses him to reveal where he was, as she'll be held responsible if he did something wrong. She then recalls Yukiko and assumes he was at her house, thinking there's no issue. But when she tries to confirm, Tajima changes the subject, and she simply tells him to return to classes and come back after school so they can have lunch together. He agrees. In the classroom, Tadashi tries to send a paper airplane to Shiori, but she destroys it immediately, causing him to cry. The teacher reprimands him. A few seconds later, Shiori senses the presence of a red eye and asks permission to go to the infirmary. In the hallway, she attacks a red-eyed crow, turning it into paper. This makes her realize she needs to stay closer to the other young people to keep a watchful eye on them. Back at Misuzu's house, Yuka wakes up and watches Kakeru training with Misuzu. He notices he's improved significantly with his new techniques and the Eye of Aeon. He manages to dodge one of Misuzu's attacks and even lands a hit, surprising her. He apologizes, but she assures him it's fine, asking only that he not forget what he's learned. At that moment, Yuka approaches with a handkerchief and hands it to Misuzu, but as she holds it, Yuka takes the opportunity to lick Misuzu's wound and declares that she too will now be like Kakeru. At that moment, everyone realizes Yuka overheard their earlier conversation. Later, at school, Tajima buys food from a vending machine, and Yukiko approaches, apologizing for being rude to him earlier. Surprised, Tajima offers her a drink and buys another for himself. Yukiko seizes the moment to talk, saying she believes Kakeru also feels lonely like she does, but in a way, he's always been cared for by the doctor, each in their own way. Tajima agrees, admitting he hadn't realized this until she pointed it out. Moved, Yukiko hugs him, and at that moment, the doctor watches from a distance, smiling before leaving. Yukiko reflects that thanks to the doctor, Tajima is alive, and otherwise, he would have died long ago. She promises that when the Crimson Night ends, the two of them will go out to have fun and eat together. A little later, Misuzu, Yuka, and Kakeru are outside the house looking for Yukiko. They decide to split up. Kakeru and Yuka search inside the house, while Misuzu and Kukuri check the garden. During the search, Misuzu asks Kukuri about Kakeru, and how she knows he treats her differently because of her resemblance to his sister. Misuzu asks Kukuri to let her know if anything happens between them, as she could act as a mediator. Kukuri responds with a gentle smile. Meanwhile, Yuka decides to clean the windows of the house, and Kakeru asks why. She replies that since they'll be staying at Misuzu's for a while, they should at least help with cleaning. He smiles at her attitude, and suddenly Yuka hugs him, startled by the red-eyed lizard. Kakeru reassures her that the animal won't harm her. At that moment, they hear a noise from the second floor. Kakeru decides to investigate, and upon arriving, finds Shiori, who suddenly attacks him. Surprised, he asks why, and she reveals she was sent to attack him because he awakened the demons. Meanwhile, at school, Tajima invites Yukiko and the doctor to eat together, hoping the Crimson Knight doesn't appear that day. However, when they arrive at the infirmary, they're met with a horrific scene. Superbia has killed the doctor. Back at Misuzu's house, Kakeru dodges Shiori's attacks and asks if she's allied with the Black Knights. She responds that she might be, and explains that the attack was just a test to assess his skills. According to her, Kakeru is developing well and is someone she can place her hopes in, but he's confused and doesn't understand her intentions. The same time, in the infirmary, Yukiko faces Superbia, while Tajima tries to save the doctor. However, when the doctor dies, Tajima's body begins to glow intensely. Consumed by rage, he unleashes a fire attack so powerful that it destroys a school wall and accidentally injures Yukiko. Later, Misuzu and Kukuri are worried about Yukiko, and Misuzu reflects that their enemies are too strong and will likely try to break the bonds that unite them, as their fate will be death if they don't stay together. Shortly after, they spot Yukiko leaping across rooftops and call out to her. When she approaches, Misuzu asks why she's injured, and Yukiko explains what happened. Meanwhile, Tajima continues fighting Superbia alone atop the city's buildings. Back at the house, Shiori tells Kakeru that because he awakened the demon, he must help them defeat them all. Suddenly, the red-eyed lizard appears and attacks Shiori, turning her into paper. Before disappearing, Shiori warns Kakeru that the demons are nearby. Immediately after, Superbia appears before him. Confused, Kakeru asks why she's there if they're not in the Crimson Night, and she replies that the Black Knights can also travel between the two worlds. At the same time, Yukiko shows that part of the city has been destroyed by Tajima's battle with Superbia. Superbia then sends out energy to summon Misuzu to the house, leaving the group unsure of who Tajima is actually fighting. To confront her, they decide to split up. Yukiko stays with Tajima, while Misuzu and Kukuri rush to help Kakeru. Upon arriving, Misuzu summons her swords to fight Superbia, who responds by summoning the previously defeated knights to attack Kakeru. Then, Superbia reveals her true form, Misako Kusakabe, the major from Misuzu's clan. Shocked, Misuzu asks why she became a Black Knight, and Misako replies that she did it to protect Viridia. After exchanging a few blows, Misako faces Misuzu and asks if she's willing to die trying to stop her. With resolve, Misuzu declares that, if necessary, she will die to protect her friends. Meanwhile, Yukiko searches for Tajima. When she finally finds him, she realizes the city is in chaos and discovers he's not actually fighting Superbia, but an illusion. She tries to make him stop, but Tajima insists he can no longer control himself and begs her to stop him. In response, Yukiko removes her glasses to reveal her true strength. As she does, the Crimson Knight returns. Moments later, Shiori approaches Yuka, who is waiting for Kakeru, and reveals that he's currently fighting the Black Knights. Yuka says she wants to help him, but Shiori stops her, explaining that Kakeru needs to improve his power on his own. Worried, Yuka asks if he'll be okay, and Shiori replies that he will, though she's unsure about the others. In the garden of the house, Kakeru realizes that the knights he's fighting are mere illusions created by magic. At the same time, Misuzu senses she must attack Misako quickly, or she won't be able to defeat her. As Misako prepares for a final strike, Kukuri appears and restrains her with her ice chains. Misuzu seizes the opportunity to counterattack, but Misako is faster and destroys her swords. At that moment, Kakeru anticipates Misako's next attack on Misuzu and manages to save her. Then, as Misako vanishes along with the Crimson Knight, she declares that she has succeeded in breaking the bonds between them. Later, Shiori explains to the group that she works for the Holy Office of Control, whose mission is to monitor and contain magic that could endanger lives. She reveals that she's there to stop a demon that was recently unleashed. Furthermore, she discloses that the Black Knights are fighting against this demon, leaving the group even more confused. The next day, Yukiko is lying in bed with a fever while Kukuri tends to her. During her sleep, Yukiko dreams of Tajima dead in her arms and desperately tries to save him until Kukuri uses her magic to calm her. In the living room, Shiori continues explaining to Kakeru and Misuzu. She reveals that the Black Knights are not enemies but allies. The reason they attack the group is that they carry fragments of a powerful hollow stone in their bodies. This revelation shocks everyone, and Shiori explains that the stone was divided into 7 fragments, each held by Yuka, Yukiko, Tajima, Misuzu, Kukuri, Shiori herself, and the imprisoned witch. Confused, they ask why they're treated as enemies, and Shiori clarifies that the fragments alone pose no threat, but if combined, they could unleash a devastating power that would endanger the entire world. After hearing this, Misuzu concludes that Lisette brought them to the Crimson Knight to unleash this power. Shiori confirms, adding that Lisette's true name is Liselotte, and that her goal is to open the gate to Hell, known to them as the Black Moon. If this gate opens, the entire world will fall into ruins. However, Misuzu points out that Tajima is dead, meaning the 7 fragments no longer exist. Shiori corrects her, saying that Kakeru, with the Eye of Aeon, is still capable of helping to open the gate. At that moment, Yuka arrives with tea for everyone, and when she hands a cup to Misuzu, Misuzu notices a small blade inside it. To avoid trouble, she takes the cup to the kitchen, leaving the others alone in the room. Yuka, taking advantage of Misuzu's absence, sits next to Kakeru and asks him to rest a bit. Later, Kakeru is alone, reflecting on everything Shiori told him. He's startled when Yuka appears in front of him in her underwear, asking to rest together. Feeling extremely uncomfortable, Kakeru is interrupted when Shiori appears and calls him to her room to continue discussing the 7 fragments and how to defeat the demon. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the house, Misuzu is meditating and training with her sword. In the garden, Kakeru sits with Yuka embracing him, while Shiori examines the broken pieces of one of the protective dolls. At that moment, Shiori begins to tell them an ancient story. Long ago, a woman known as the Witch of Babylon Hos gained immortality. She later fell in love with a king named Vlad, who ruled Drasvania, a kingdom ravaged by wars. For her, nothing else mattered, as long as she could stay by his side. But during the conflict, Vlad was killed by one of his own friends. Upon discovering this, the witch swore to destroy the entire world. To stop her, the Holy Order of the Dawn confronted her about 70 years ago. Some mages from this order managed to imprison her in a crystal in another world. The ritual was performed in that very city, which gave rise to the Crimson Knight phenomenon. These mages who sealed her became the Black Knights, whose mission is to protect the 7 seals that prevent the gate to Hell from opening. Kakeru listens attentively, but Shiori continues. Dano opisistikim, sorry, Ross. Explaining that the Black Knights believe Vlad could awaken within Kakeru's body to aid the witch in her revenge and open the gate to Hell. That's why they want to kill him. Frightened, Kakeru fears he might actually lose control to Vlad. But Shiori reassures him, saying there are many differences between them, and their feelings are opposites. Moreover, the Eye of Aeon isn't just for aiding the witch. It can also be used to repel her. Shiori explains that this was why she approached the group in secret without revealing her true identity at first. She needed to understand Kakeru's feelings. After observing him, she initially thought he seemed like a fragile boy who could be controlled by Vlad. But upon getting to know him better, she decided to give him a chance, seeing that the world could still be saved through him. Finally, Shiori directly asks if he's willing to save the world. Kakeru responds that he is, but admits he feels weak and believes he can't achieve anything without his friends. Later, Kakeru visits Yukiko's room to check on her and, upon leaving, encounters Kukuri, who greets him. He smiles and apologizes for treating her like an enemy earlier. Kukuri accepts without hesitation. Next, Kakeru goes to Misuzu's room and asks if they can talk. After entering, Misuzu opens up, saying she always wanted to be as great as Misako and believed she could defeat her. Though she failed in practice, Misuzu explains that Misako's power is so great because she learned from her companions, while Misuzu isolated herself and couldn't grow the same way. Hearing this, Kakeru encourages her, saying she shouldn't blame herself because, thanks to her, he awakened the eye of Aeon. He understands her feelings, as he also had to fight against those he admired most. These words comfort Misuzu, who embraces him, deeply moved. Meanwhile, in another room, Yuka wakes up and asks Shiori about Kakeru. Shortly after, she decides to go look for him. However, she finds him with Misuzu and Kukuri. Seeing them together, Yuka quickly pulls Kakeru to herself, distancing him from the others. Shiori then explains to the girls that to defeat the witch, the mages had to resort to forbidden magic capable of splitting an enemy's power into 7 fragments, weakening them. These 7 fragments were cast into the same world at the moment the Crimson Knight emerged. At that moment, Yukiko realizes she loved Tajima, and his death pains her deeply. A few minutes later, Kakeru follows Yuka, who leads him to Misuzu's room. Though he doesn't want her to enter, she insists. Inside the room, Yuka asks him to kiss her, questioning if he still needs his sister when he's with her. Kakeru remains silent, and suddenly, Kukuri vanishes in front of the girls. Shiori explains to Misuzu that this is normal, as Kukuri is actually an illusion created by Yuka to protect Kakeru. Hearing this, Misuzu realizes that the fragment in this world belongs to Yuka. At that moment, the Crimson Knight returns, and Yukiko, fleeing her room, decides to confront Superbia, driven by the pain of Tajima's death. Soon after, the others realize what's happening and rush to help her, but Yuka begs Kakeru not to go. Meanwhile, monsters appear and attack the couple. Without weapons, Kakeru tries to fight back, but it's Yuka who uses magic to repel them. Immediately after, she faints. This makes Kakeru hesitate, wanting to protect Yuka, but knowing he must help his friends. Ultimately, he leaves her in a safe place and heads to the giant tree to fight alongside the others. At the same time, Yukiko faces Superbia, but she is far more powerful and severely injures her. Seeing Yukiko fall, Superbia recalls that she is immortal and rips the fragment of the stone from her body, making her mortal. Later, when Thay Group arrives to rescue her, they find Yukiko in agony. Enraged, Kakeru attacks Superbia, managing to cut off her arm. At that moment, the crystal inside Yukiko falls to the ground. And to everyone's shock, Yuka appears, picks up the crystal, and throws it at the seal, imprisoning Lisette, freeing her. Instantly, Lisette assumes her true form as the Witch of Babylon. Misuzu immediately senses the dark, overwhelming aura she emanates. Shocked, Kakeru questions Yuki about what she's done, but he realizes she's enchanted by the witch. Lisette promises to fulfill Yuka's wish and then attacks to kill her and take her crystal. Kakeru tries to protect Yuka, but fails to prevent her death, and the witch takes her fragment. Witnessing this, Viridia teleports Misuzu and Kakeru away from the witch, then joins Superbia and Shiori to confront her. Soon after, Kakeru wakes up in another world, believing it to be Yuka's world, alongside Misuzu. He sets out to find her. Meanwhile, in the Crimson Knight, Superbia and Shiori advance against the witch, while Viridia reveals her true form, a massive dragon named Georgios, capable of purifying all the darkness in the world. The 3 mages then attack the witch together. In parallel, in the other world, Kakeru and Misuzu anxiously await the outcome of the battle, worried. During the heat of the battle, Shiori lands a blow against the witch, but she appears behind her, preparing to strike. At that moment, Kukuri intervenes to save her. Seeing her, Shiori discovers Kukuri's true identity. She is a guardian angel with wings who protected the girl when she was still alive. The witch declares that none of them are a match for her and unleashes a devastating attack against them all. Suddenly, Superbia manages to restrain the witch and begs Viridia to kill her immediately, even if it costs her own life. And that's exactly what Viridia does. At the same time, in Yuka's world, Kakeru insists he wants to help defeat the witch. However, Misuzu tells him he lacks the power to do so, and the only way to gain enough strength to win is for them to unite as a couple. Hearing this, Kakeru feels it would be a betrayal of Yuka, but Misuzu comforts him, saying it wouldn't be a betrayal, as if Yuka remains alive, he'll have the power needed to save both her and the world. Convinced, he agrees. After they unite, a door opens before them, revealing a passage back to the Crimson Knight and Superbia. Upon seeing them, Superbia confesses that she fell in love with Viridia long ago, but now he is dead, as are the others. She declares that there is no longer any salvation for the world, and vanishes shortly after. Then, Yuka appears before Kakeru, saying she loves him, but when he approaches to embrace her, she stabs him with a sword. Coldly, she reveals that the real Yuka lives within her. At that moment, Misuzu realizes the terrible truth. The witch has taken over Yuka's body. The witch then states that she needs the power of the Eye of Aeonto, destroy the world, and invokes Vlad's name. She proceeds to kill Kakeru and takes the Eye of Aeon. Seconds later, Misuzu realizes the witch has achieved her goal, and the entire world plunges into indescribable darkness. However, thanks to the Eye of Aeon, Kakeru can foresee the future, and he sees the exact moment Lisette would be freed. Using his vision, he alters fate and manages to save Yuka. Surprised, the witch approaches him and asks why he persists in fighting her. Meanwhile, Viridia orders Superbia to kill her, but Shiori intervenes, saying they shouldn't. At that moment, Kakeru raises his sword before the witch, and she mockingly asks if he truly believes he can defeat her. He responds firmly that he doesn't intend to kill her, knowing that without the other crystals, she needs his Eye of Aeon to destroy the world. Immediately after, Kakeru makes a decision. He uses his sword to cut his own throat and falls unconscious. In that instant, within his mind, memories of his childhood surface, moments he shared with Yuka, both before and after his sister's death. When he awakens, Kakeru is lying on a stretcher with Yuka by his side. She had saved his life using her power, but fainted in the process. Confused, he asks Misuzu what's happening, and she explains everything that occurred when Yuka saved him. She also weakened the witch momentarily, allowing Shiori to transport them to this world. Misuzu then scolds him, saying it was a mistake to try to take his own life. Kakeru agrees, but insists he needs to stay alive to protect Yuka for everything she's done for him. Soon after, Shiori and Abadia appear, revealing a terrible truth. The reason Yuka fainted was because, on that day, she also killed Kakeru, as he possesses the Eye of Aeon. Even so, Kakeru and Misuzu don't understand why he's still alive. Shiori explains that in the past, Kukuri killed a boy from another world, believing he had the Eye of Aeon, but that boy didn't actually possess it, as it belonged to Kakeru's world. This means Yuka saved Kakeru by switching him to another world before his sister could kill him. Shortly after, in front of everyone, Yuka vanishes from the bed. Looking at the moon, the group decides to head to the rooftop, where they discover the witch had imprisoned Yuka in a crystal to prevent her from using her powers. Desperate, Kakeru begs the witch to free Yuka, and she agrees, but only if he approaches her. However, as soon as he takes a step forward, the witch tries to rip out his eye. At that moment, Shiori and Kukuri attack together, wounding the witch. Meanwhile, Superbia hides Kakeru for a moment, and Viridia traps the witch in a bubble. During the battle, Shiori is mortally wounded. Before passing, Kakeru takes Shiori's crystal and hands it to Superbia. To his surprise, she tells him that with that crystal, he can defeat the witch himself, as Shiori's power was time travel. Combined with the Eye of Aeon, it could finally end her. Despite his doubts, Superbia encourages him, assuring him that everyone believes in him. Prepared, Kakeru receives a cursed sword from Misuzu, capable of consuming souls to serve as a shield in his battle. Seconds later, the witch breaks free from the bubble and orders Kakeru to surrender. He refuses, resolute that he must not lose hope in the world, and needs to fight for the person who has always stood by his side. Hearing this, the witch summons Vlad, who, to everyone's surprise, asks her not to destroy the world, touched by Kakeru's determination. Even so, the witch decides to kill Kakeru and launches a deadly attack. However, Misuzu and Misako step in front of him, shielding him. When the dust settles, the witch appears from another point, ready to attack again. But behind her stands Kakeru, holding Shiori's crystal. As she turns, he activates its power and traps her inside the crystal. Thanks to this victory, Yuka is freed from the crystal and runs to embrace Kakeru. Meanwhile, the Crimson Night world begins to collapse along with the witch, who vanishes completely. At that moment, Misako appears and offers to take them back to their world, thanking them for helping defeat the witch. The next day, on the school rooftop, Kakeru is lying down, gazing at the moon. When Yuka appears to join him, a sudden gust of wind lifts her skirt, causing Kakeru to accidentally see her underwear and blush with embarrassment. He apologizes, but Yuka simply says it's no big deal and sits beside him to tease him a bit. Suddenly, Kakeru feels pain in his eye again, and the two are transported to another world. This time, it's not the Crimson Knight, but a Pink Knight, frightened. And they run through the school corridors until they find Misuzu and Yukiko. Later, the four gather near a window to try to understand what's happening. At that moment, the pain in Kakeru's eye intensifies. He removes his eye patch, but his eye turns completely red, and he realizes he can see through the girls' uniforms. Shiori and Tajima arrive, and upon understanding the situation, they tell him to put the eye patch back on. Thoroughly embarrassed, Kakeru closes his eyes as Yuka hands him the eye patch. When he takes too long to put it on, Misuzu slaps him. This makes Kakeru suspect his powers have changed. To test this, Yukiko removes her glasses and discovers her new ability. She immediately runs to hug and kiss Yuka, making her uncomfortable, but Misuzu quickly tells her to stop. Excited, Tajima decides to test his power as well. To his surprise, instead of conjuring fire, he now controls water. Laughing, he plays with his new ability while everyone watches. Suddenly, small shadowy monsters appear before them. Everyone except Misuzu finds the creatures cute. Misuzu, however, draws her sword to fight, but instead of a blade, something else appears. She becomes flustered, trying to avoid explaining what it is. Yukiko notices that when Misuzu summoned her weapon, the monsters dispersed. This intrigues Kakeru, who doesn't understand what the object was. Tajima starts teasing him until Kukuri drops a bombshell, saying loudly, "That's a weapon women use to play alone," if you know what I mean. Everyone is shocked, and the girls blush intensely at the explanation. Embarrassed, Misuzu makes her weapon disappear immediately. Suddenly, the entire ground begins to shake as if an earthquake is about to occur. When they approach to see what's happening, 7 pink knights appear, introducing themselves with a strange dance and stating their mission is to protect this world. After they vanish, the group decides to head to the giant tree to learn more about this place. There, they find a couple of knights acting very affectionately. One of them resembles Viridia, but instead of telling them to leave as before, they invite the group to stay. However, as they're playing with a whip, Yuka gets scared and asks Kakeru if they shouldn't go home. He agrees. Misuzu grows worried and wants to leave immediately, but Shiori suggests they visit nearby hot springs, leaving Misuzu even more puzzled. At that moment, the small black monsters reappear, but this time the boys decide to play with them as if it's no big deal. Meanwhile, Misuzu walks off alone, and Yuka, confused, asks Yukiko if she's angry. Yukiko confirms she is, as no one knows when they'll return to their world, and everything that's happened has been bizarre. Kukuri tries to cheer Misuzu up but fails. The rest of the group decides to head to the hot springs. While in the water, they ask Kakeru to use the Eye of Aeon to locate the ruler of this world. He removes his eye patch and focuses, but to his shock, the eye points to Yuka as the ruler of this world. Kakeru is so stunned that suddenly, the water and their swimsuits disappear, leaving everyone completely naked. Yuka, mortified, activates her power, and when the light fades, both Kakeru and Tajima realize they now have female bodies. Shiori believes this was caused by Yuka's power, and Kukuri, completely calm, says it's no problem because they have sculptural bodies. Hearing this, they notice the girls' stares and quickly cover themselves, dying of embarrassment. At that moment, the pink knight vanishes, and the anime ends in this bizarre fashion. This is the end. If you got this far, comment, "I want a cookie," like and subscribe. Until next time, bye!